propaganda war? I mean, what were the motivations? Why would people forge or try to forge Paul's name?
Well, we do have documents that come at least from the 2nd and 3rd century that show that there were different spins on Paul, and taking him in a direction of teaching that was against the domestic order, against I'm thinking in particular of the Acts of Paul and Thecla, where Thecla we don't know if she was a historical figure or not. She may have been, but the account that was written about her towards the end of the 2nd century portrays Paul as teaching that if you want to get to heaven, you can't have sex, so you can't get married. And so Thecla comes under this teaching, baptizes herself, and all kinds of crazy things happen. And so some scholars think that in order to make Paul sound more conservative than he actually was, some people wrote documents like Ephesians and the pastoral epistles, 1st and 2nd Timothy and Titus, to, make Paul into more of a social conservative than he actually was. So there were false teachers out there, and you can see this in 2 Timothy, where Paul says some people are already saying that the resurrection has already come,
right.
And 2 Peter and Jude are writing against false teachers, often who are giving really confusing teaching about the way we live, as well as the work of Christ. And John had to face the same thing too. He says their antichrists are already out there, and they're not really from us. So the apostles were having to deal with people that were spinning the faith in directions that they wanted to go. So I can understand why some people would think that after the age of the apostles, others would come along and try to argue for the more orthodox line in the name of the apostles. The problem is one of, in the first place, of ethics. Claiming to speak on behalf of the one whom Paul calls in Titus the unlying God, only telling lies. And then the other thing is you're not centuries after the fact. You're writing to people who are probably still living, who would know and be able to tell what is true from what is false. So the scenario that has writers being able to pass off things as actually being Paul's when they're not Paul's, it's just not really very plausible. So I think we're back to the best explanation of the fact that letters like Ephesians read so much like Paul that if they didn't have a name attached to them, the church probably would have thought, well, this is probably Paul. They're so close that they sound so much like him, and yet there are such subtle differences that it's more plausible that the differences are there because Paul wrote them without having to try to sound like himself.